Hello, I'm Brock-Pullin, and I've not made a YouTube chess video in quite some time, so I'm going to show you one of the games that I played yesterday at the Evanston Chess Economy Open. This was a Game 50 tournament, which I won, and in the last round I played Bill Brock. He is an expert, rated 2030, which is almost 100 points above myself. So he opened knight f3, and it transposed into a queen's gambit. And he played knight to c3, which allows me to play the Noteboom Variation, pawn takes c4. Now, I played this in the Live Blitz 3. I give the link in the comments to this video. And people were surprised that I was holding on to the c4 pawn in the queen's gambit. The queen's gambit is the most solid gambit in chess. You're not supposed to be able to hold on to the pawn. But I think people are getting this confused with the queen's gambit accepted. They're totally different openings. Let's look at the queen's gambit accepted. And the queen's gambit accepted is taking on move 2. And I haven't studied very much theory in the queen's gambit accepted, but I know that you don't want to hold on to the pawn here, because the goal for black is to give back the pawn and try to strike back in the center, say with playing pawn to c5. In fact, if you hold on to the pawn, if white plays e3, which is not the best move, but let's say he does, and you hold on to the pawn, then pawn to a4 undermines the support of the pawn on c4. So you have to protect it with the pawn. You cannot play a6 because that is an illusion. It's pinned to your rook on a8. So you have to play pawn to c6, right? And then pawn takes, and queen to f3. And there's no way for black to block the diagonal to his rook on a8 except by throwing the knight away for nothing. So that is how you can refute the greedy queen's gambit accepted. So that you can't hold on to the pawn there. But in my game against Brock, something totally different, the Noteboom Variation of the Semi-Slav, was played, which is pawn takes on move 4. And Brock played a4, and then bishop to b4, the critical move. And this is an opening. I've played the Noteboom against the Queen's Gambit for a very long time, and I'm familiar with most of its nuances. And this opening, usually the main line is e3. Brock did not play it, but e3 was played, and then b5 is usually played to protect the pawn on c4, and bishop to d2. And then you can play either a5 or bishop b7 here. It's a matter of taste. I prefer bishop b7. Pawn takes, bishop takes, pawn takes. And now white undermines the support of the pawn on c4 by playing pawn to b3. And you cannot take because this is check. So black plays pawn to a5, and then pawn takes pawn, push pass to b4, bishop moves, knight to f6. And this is the main line of the Noteboom defense. And white has a lot of space in the center. He's got 2 more pawns influencing the center than black does, and he has some dangerous middle game chances. But in the endgame, I take black because these 2 connected outside pass pawns in an endgame are oftentimes more valuable than a piece. So once, when I was still in high school, I beat 2300 from the black side of this position. So the Noteboom is a very special opening to me, and I'm always pleased when my opponents allow me to get into it. So Brock, actually, he did not play e3. After bishop b4, he played pawn to e4, which is a very double-edged move. You conquer more space in the center this way, but the e-pawn can prove to be a weakness at some points, and also you're losing control over d4 slightly. So b5 to hold on to the c4 pawn. And now the main move is bishop to d2, just like in the regular line, to break the pin. But Brock played No, actually, he didn't. He captured first on b5. And I think this is a premature capture. because it gives options to black and takes away options from white. So he probably should not have captured on b5 at the point where he did. So he plays bishop to e2 here, and then bishop to b7, and now he has some problems on e4, because if he guards it with his queen, then I develop with the knight to f6, and black has total initiative here. For instance, if bishop to g5, then bishop takes e4 wins, because of queen takes, knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes c3, and black is ahead by a lot. So queen to c2 is not sufficient to guard the e-pawn. He pushes to e5, which is extremely committal, but in this position probably necessary. So I develop with the knight to e7, castles, and now that the pin is broken, I have to trade. Black always trades the bishop for the knight in this situation because it's a locked center. So knights are more popular than bishops here. And knight to d7, planning to rearrange the knights, and queen to c2 to support the knight coming into e4. And now knight to g5, and I kick it, and it goes back here, and I do not want a knight showing up on d6, so I trade the bishop for it. Now knight takes, knight to d5. And now, in this position with a locked center, I want to show that my two knights are doing more than his two bishops. Because in any kind of an open game, the two bishops will be better than the two knights. So I want to try to keep it closed. He plays his bishop to d2, and he's threatening to play rook to a6 here, so I stop that by playing pawn to a6. And he plays his bishop to g4 to try to force through the pawn f4 to f5 break. And I play queen to c7, and he plays f4, which just allows me to take control over that square with g6. I think possibly Brock assumed that I was going to castle kingside with my king, but no, that's not the case. So he pulls his bishop back, and I play h5 now to blockade the light squares. Now, in this position, he wants to play g4 and f5, but in order to play g4, he must play h3. And if he plays h3 now, then I push the pawn to h4, and if he pushes to g4, I can always take en passant. So that's very basic flank play in chess. You don't push the rook pawn first, you have to push the knight pawn first. So he plays g3, and I develop my king to d7 to connect my rooks. The king is very safe in the center because the center is closed. So he plays h3, which is probably a mistake. He should prepare it first by playing rook to f3 and bishop to e1. He plays h3, and now knight to f5 threatens this fork on the g3 square, and he pulls his queen back to defend it, and now I can take control over the point on g3 by playing h4, and he pushes past, and then knight comes into g3, and he moves his rook, and now I play knight to b6. And the point of this is, if he avoids the bishop trade by playing bishop to d1, then I play queen to c6, and now he cannot dodge the queen trade because of mate on h1. But he played rook to g2, so now I have to trade on e2, and now I get on the long diagonal with queen c6. He prepares the pawn push to f5, and I anticipate the pawn push, and with everything all on the king side, I'm going to start pushing my queenside pawns. But he breaks on the king side, which leads to an endgame after pawn takes, queen takes, rook takes, king takes, rook check. And this check is very problematic for him, because if he comes to the center where the king wants to go, then rook to g3, and I go after his h-pawn. So he goes to h2, and this his king is cut off, and that's always a danger sign in an endgame where your king is cut off on the edge. So I centralize the knight, trades, check, and I play up, and he goes there, and I decided to prevent the side attack on the pawn by playing rook to g6. He captures, and I get my queenside pawns rolling. He plays here, which forces a trade of rooks. The resulting ending is lost, so I'm thinking he should have kept his rooks on the board. So this, and then I play to b4, and he pushes the pawn, and I run back with my king to stop it. And he runs in with his king, and I attack. He needs to put his bishop on c1 now to stop the pawn to come to b2, and then I take anyway, and he pushes the pawn, and I run back with my king, and now I dive my king underneath the pawn, and now knight to d5, and he resigned because his king can't get in anywhere. My king is going to slide under his pawn, and the 3 pawns can beat the bishop by themselves. The bishop cannot stop the pawns when they're this far down the board. So I hope that you enjoyed this game and that it's not too long for YouTube to accept. I will talk to you next time.